We're just, I will let you know when the sharing pops up here.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
While she's sharing, I'll let everyone know that I started recording this meeting, and we'll post this on our HSMAI Minnesota website after it's done. So if you see something that moves through quickly, just know that we'll get a recording of this so you can look closer at the deck. Courtney's got a lot of great information to share with us today.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to hopefully assume that this is indeed there and you can see one screen. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Awesome. All right, thank you all. Again, I'm going to be going through these slides very quickly, but I'm excited to be able to showcase what we do have available, and we will leave time for questions at the end. So where are we? What are we doing? Where are we going? I'm going to be covering a lot of different topics today, talking about the hotels, as well as talking about all the other things that we are seeing as big influencers as it relates to the tourism and hospitality community. So as it relates to the city, first, I want to be able to start with the conversation around George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and the protests.
Courtney, I think we lost your screen. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, thank you. That's very good for me to know. Let's see if I can make this work. All right.
There we go. That's better.
Okay, let's see if it continues to want to play with me. I have not presented on Teams outside of my organization, so my apologies for the hiccups. So I did want to start with a conversation around George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Most of my conversation today and what I'm going to be going through is related to kind of the situation that we are in right now, which is overwhelmingly due to COVID, but also due to social unrest and what we are seeing and what is happening in our community. The killing of George Floyd really elevated Minneapolis into an international spotlight that we've never wanted to be in. And as an organization, Meet Minneapolis is very committed to helping support the city and what they are trying to do to help rectify some of the long, deeply entrenched challenges and problems that we've had within our city, and helping to make things move in the right direction. So very much one of the things that we'll be talking about moving forward into our recovery plans and things of that nature is that terrible things happen in Minneapolis, but we're hopeful that we can come up with the solutions here as well. So we do have a task force within our own organization focusing on 3 different areas, which you can see at the screen. So if you do have more interest in this, please do ask your hotel or feel free to reach out to me. So I'm happy to share insights and information as it relates to this important work that we are doing. I do want to talk a little bit about the safety and security. So as we talk about COVID, really, and what's happened in the city, there's COVID, and then there was the killing of George Floyd, and then there was the conversation around dismantling the police and general public safety. What I'm summarizing as, if I call 911, will somebody come? And is that somebody going to help me? Or am I afraid that they're going to do something like harm an individual or have an incorrect response to the situation? So that's this challenge that we have right now, compounded with a lot of workers not being downtown. So if you have been downtown Minneapolis, you may have noticed Nicollet Mall does have some congregation of activity, and there's a very active pilot program that has been extended right now with some very aggressive outreach to the people that are on the streets, some of whom are homeless, some of whom have mental health issues, to try to provide services and the things that those communities need. So you can see all of these different organizations that are coming together to help bolster up downtown and continue to keep downtown vibrant and strong and healthy and get people the help that they need. When we speak to our city council as it relates to public safety as an organization, we really want for our entire industry to be back to work, and that is our biggest priority. And we want to make sure the city council does know that high profile public safety fears about physical safety is something that is a detriment, in addition to COVID, to bringing people back. And very much there is a desire for the city to continue to provide this clarity around what is the future of public safety within Minneapolis. And we do know that we do have reputation challenges that we will need to address in the future once we are able to have more answers to these questions that a lot of meeting planners and you on this call might even have. So know that this is some of the work that we are also continuing to do. So let's talk about COVID. First, a step back and also kind of a look forward. We currently have nearly 24 million cases that have been diagnosed throughout the world. We do know, as it relates to travel industry and where we were in a very strong position in 2019, supporting a lot of jobs and obviously with our economic output. In Minnesota, it was the 6th largest employer. You can see a number of hospitality jobs with more than $8 billion in visitor spending coming into Minneapolis, and nearly 36,000 jobs within the city itself. So you can also see that we had a lot of growth coming into COVID, where you can see, again, the jobs as well as hospitality jobs in general. And we also had a number of meetings that were on the books. So we do, as an organization, work and book with 600 to 700 events a year. And so those events, about 20-25% are booked in the year for the year. So that's business that didn't necessarily occur this year. And this is outside of what the hotels book directly or work with directly. So you can see what this looked like as of the end of February, where we were and what was on the books. So now let's talk about kind of hotel occupancy and then what happened. So obviously a huge loss of spending, significant loss of jobs within our industry, within our city, and a lot of lost wages and those lost taxes. This is a slide that comes from Metropolitan Airports Commission. You can see there that the passengers levels dropped incredibly low, a very significant increase in cuts, daily operations, and really just that never seen kind of that almost complete stoppage of the industry than what we saw before. Some point in time, we had 14 different hotels that were closed within the city, representing about 30% of our available supply. And you can see in this chart what that actually looks like and what that cliff looks like. As you look towards and going across towards August, what you are seeing here are those weekend jumps. So we have heard from our hoteliers that a lot of that tends to be hyper local business, either people that were visiting friends and family, and maybe they would have stayed with them before, but now they're staying in the city, as well as people that are coming in from the suburbs because they just want to be in a different room, as well as some partying aspects, some big poker games, things of that nature. We do know that some of our hotels are still accepting cash for payment for rooms. So the weekend is where we're starting to see some of this occupancy levels that are bouncing up, but nowhere near what we would otherwise anticipate or hope or expect to see at this point in time, which is, a peak month for us. One of the things that I want to talk about as it relates to the region is that Minneapolis hotels are very much focused on meetings, events, conventions, those big sporting events, the big date nights, the concerts, things of that nature. And with all of those things being choked off at the same time, compounded with public safety, you can see that Minneapolis and Minneapolis hotel recovery has lagged that of other parts of the city, and even St. Paul. So again, when you do look city to city, one of the things to note is that Minneapolis's hotels in general are also very concentrated. So I moved from Portland a few years ago. Portland had an outcropping near the airport, for example, had an outcropping near the Washington-Oregon border, had the downtown hotels. Minneapolis doesn't really have geographically dispersed clusters of hotels, and it doesn't really have a lot of economy properties, mid-level properties. So those are also things that come into factor and come into play here, where you have more people driving versus flying. I want a free place to park, with my hotel stay. All of those things are impacting Minneapolis in particular, low occupancy rate. You can see that the forecast continues to be a challenge moving forward, and continues into 2021. That's STR, CBRE shows also a slower recovery to some of those occupancy levels, not necessarily seeing that come back until 2024. Future Minneapolis events, I do think that's important to show that we do still have things on the books. However, there are a number of concerns about these events, as some of them, quite frankly, are not into the force majeure parts of their contract yet, so they are waiting to cancel, as it were. Also, with these group sizes, We tend to have a lot of the public shows at the convention center. So as you are thinking about compression in the city, things of that nature, we're not getting big, huge citywides that are saying, I really want to be in Minneapolis in January. So these are a lot of the public shows. So we're monitoring very closely the capacity limits that are offered by the state and what that looks like in the future. There is some hope and optimism as it relates to travel and the airport. You can see that compared to 95% drop off, now it's 70% at the airport. You can see that a number of those flights have come back, and there are some concessionaires that are back open, and there is some parking revenue coming back at the airport. I'm going to talk a little bit about consumers. So what's the mindset? What's happening in the mind of the consumers? What are they thinking about? What are they feeling? How are people acting? So if you are interested in pop psychology and you want to know if what you think about when you're thinking about your own trip is reflected by others or potentially your clientele, this is the section that really starts to talk about that. So again, we have a lot going on. There's so much stuff that happened related to COVID, and all of these things are factoring into people's minds. Fear and concern is the overriding, overwhelming emotion. No matter what somebody says, kind of their behavior, what they think they're going to do, a lot of it is driven by that base emotion of fear. So you can see, again, there continues to be a lot of things. This encompasses a lot of things. I'm concerned about getting sick. I'm concerned about getting a family member sick. I'm concerned about what's going to happen to my job. I'm concerned about my children if I have children in schooling. So almost every decision that a consumer is making is being driven by this fear response. There's also very much this gap between surveys and research. It was a bigger deal before the economy reopened than it is now. But I do want to share that if you see research where people talk a lot about pent-up demand and excitement, which I will also talk about, I want to give an asterisk next to that. There is basically a large gap. There's a saying in Italian that basically means between the saying and the doing is the middle of the sea. And what that means is that people have all sorts of great intentions and all these things that they want to do, but when push comes to shove, do they actually do it? And when fear is an overriding emotion, people are a lot more hesitant to actually, quote unquote, do it, whatever that might be, book the trip, buy the new car, things of that nature. So again, this was back from April, but it shows that there's kind of this pent up demand. People are very interested, but how long is it going to take for me to actually do those activities? And this is behavior that we did see happen when things started to unlock and open up. Again, this kind of speaks about the fact that people are very unreliable in what their actual actions are, no matter what their intents are. There's a reason that all of the online websites want you to buy right now. They don't want you to wait, because if you wait, then you're less likely to do it. There was very much, we talk about these rolling opens and closures. So there was an opening, then there was a pullback. Now we're opening again talking about a national level. So you can see here, there's not huge swings, but they definitely do show some of those ebbs and up and downs that I think will continue to be our future for the next year until a vaccine is recovered. People do think in general, there's been a lot of media coverage. People do think that masks are a good idea and they are effective. So who are those people in your hotels that you have to fight with to wear their mask? Well, this is generally kind of what the research shows in terms of who is not excited to be able to be wearing a mask. This is also then doubly impactful for those of us in the hospitality industry, because these consumers are also the ones that are more likely to be out and about, to dine out, to go to a hotel, things of that nature. So it's almost a doubling down in terms of what you see coming through the doors and how many conversations you need to have. Continue to hope that this, as it becomes more common and mandatory in more places, that there will be less frontline staff that have to sit and defend, please put on your mask, things of that nature. One of the biggest conversations around coronavirus is that people do understand that there are differences in different parts of the country. There's also a challenge in that people do also project that what's happening around them is what's happening elsewhere. So in a good positive upside for us is that when people talk about COVID hotspots, people aren't talking about Minnesota. They're not talking about Minneapolis. So we're not on that list of places to watch. And this is something that we hope that we will never end up on. Outdoor activities continue to grow in how people view them as being safe activities. But you can see that they're not huge swaths. People really haven't changed that much. It's a very, very slow, gradual, how do I feel? I would also point that, again, anything indoors, close in, definitely kind of continues to fall into that unsafe part of the barometer. This is another way of looking at it as it relates to those large events. Are you willing to go right now? So there is some change in some of that actional behavior, and it's across almost every single generation as well. So right now, big conversation point is around the schools reopening. Some of the conversations that people have had, I think that this is kind of more of the hopes and dreams as someone who has children of her own, which you may or may not hear in the background, that with travel and online schooling, is there an opportunity for me to take my kids and to go spend a month in a hotel in a different location? And is there going to be this delayed summer through the fall pent up travel demand where, you know, school is no longer the demarcation that that summer is over? I think from what we have seen before that while there will be those stories and there will be those parents that do embrace that opportunity and do those things with their children, I do not think that that will be enough to actually sustain any ongoing business or to do any planning around. I think anything that we're likely to see is short spikes, little bit of information, and probably some wonderful, great stories for all of us to be jealous about reading about in the paper of some family that went and traveled around the country for the next year and did school and work along the way. There's a lot of concerns around going back to school. I think that this is relevant because as you think about businesses and meetings and events, it's not just the person's own safety, it's their family's safety. And that's the same thing that's coming into play with school. I'm worried about my children getting sick and then bringing it back to my mother or my grandmother or my family or my friends. And so this is definitely part of that equation, and events and group meetings are kind of falling into that same mental gymnastics or calculus. One of the things that I did want to pull out as well and point out is that as you are taking a look at races in particular, there is a consideration that non-white parents are more hesitant to send children back to school. There's a couple of reasons for this, some of which are impacted by actually what we've seen in the disparities as it relates to who gets very, very sick from COVID. More disproportionately impacting people of color, as well as the people who have know someone who has been affected by the disease in a severe way are more likely to be afraid, as it were, of the impacts of COVID. So that's one of the things that we are seeing here. Again, people still risk, at the end of the day, people are going to go with the most conservative thing. So you certainly will hear about people blustering. You certainly will hear about those events that do continue, or by golly, we're going to hold that meeting. But at the end of the day, most people are going to go for the conservative option, realizing that just about anything is better than getting very seriously ill or the threat of getting very seriously ill. So what about actually getting on an airplane, getting in a car? So the first thing to note is that, yes, getting in the car is definitely the way people want to go. People want to go and do those outdoor activities. I think, again, this is very good for Minneapolis. We are primarily a drive market. Minneapolis hotels, maybe not so much, but for our community at large. People really want that stamp of approval, which I think that we can all agree at this point in time is probably not going to be coming or happening at any time in the near future. But people really want the government or some entity to say, yes, it is safe to travel now. And there's really not one thing that will convince people of that, that this would be a very big step. And I do not imagine that that is anything that we will be seeing coming from the CDC in the near future. Again, the slowing down of COVID is a bigger deal than just about anything else versus the deals. If I drop my rock bottom rate, is that going to really drive demand? Yes, a little bit, but at the end of the day, getting somebody to get into their car and to drive, it's much more likely that you would pick up that local staycation, or maybe you would pick up the consumer that would have gone a step down in their hotel purchase previously, things of that nature, similar things that we saw in the recession. The biggest thing that I would say is that the spontaneous travel is really quite compelling in terms of, if you knew that you wanted to take a trip in 2 weeks, when would you book it? People are saying, I'm going to book it the week, if it's always been kind of like a week of, now it's like, well, what's 4 days out? And a lot of people, 25% saying I'd book it the day before. So from a revenue management perspective, very, very challenging. But I do think as you talk about flexible hotel policies, book now, cancel, things like that, that may be helpful in some of the additional conversion. But I do think that we will continue to see this very last minute booking. Do I feel okay to get in a car and go to, knowing everything that's happened in the last week or what's happening there, or the fact that my cousin's aunt's sister, who I saw 3 weeks ago, now has COVID, and how does that make me feel? These are all the decisions that are happening over and over and over again, multiplied across our entire region. People really miss travel. They really miss it. It's something that brings them happiness and joy, and it's one of those big cognitive things that is still very not normal for a lot of people. I would be doing my summer vacation. I would be going to X, Y, and Z. I don't get to do that anymore. So it maintains this thing that is constant barrier in people's mind of things are not normal, things are not safe. So it is very missed, and not being able to travel does contribute to, again, some of that stress and anxiety, because it's a constant reminder of something they want to do and they cannot. Fall travel, the expectations are declining. So this does, again, go with what I would mention before, where people say, well, yes, of course, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then when it comes time to make that decision, they're just not as interested in doing it. And you can see that really that started to happen in early July, around the 4th of July, when things started peaking again. And it hasn't really gone back to say, oh, yes, now everything's fine. So now people are just kind of riding out. So you kind of can see this pent-up wave that just keeps getting pushed. So we continue to be in this holding pattern where we know that there's the next phase, but the start date of the next phase keeps moving out, just like the start date for my children's school. So I think that that's something that we'll continue to monitor. And anyone that is giving you a projection of when things will be back to normal, as it were, really it's predicated on very good treatments, excellent tracking, low rates, and vaccine. And until we get those things, everything is a best guess and some hopes put into that. If you look at like what people feel like they need, there is some travel there, but I would say that overwhelmingly the travel that you're seeing right now, especially into the cities, is visiting friends and family. Again, we've talked about that emotional component of things. What's the risk I'm going to take with safety, with my family's safety? Well, seeing my grandmother that is very sick and might not make it to 2021, or maybe I've been living in an apartment alone and I really need to be around people again. My family really has wanted me to come and stay for a month. Those are the types of things that are really getting people out of their homes. Again, to that idea, what am I prioritizing? I want to spend my time with my loved ones. I want to get away from the crowds, and I want to enjoy nature. So, visiting large cities, sporting events, theme parks, they're kind of still in there, but not nearly to the level of being driven by outdoors and seeing friends and family. Again, outdoor activities continue to be seen as safe. Travel is not, train, both and flight are still considered to be unsafe, but that is moving. I think that Delta in particular in Minnesota, Minneapolis, is very well suited in that we are a Delta hub, because Delta has really come out and above other airlines in terms of their clean and safety. So as more people get more comfortable flying Delta, that speaks well for our destination, both as a transit destination, but obviously also as well as, hey, I've got great flight lift to get into Minnesota to do business somewhere in the metro area, and I know that I can fly Delta. Again, this is one of the things that we've talked about. There is no silver bullet. It's going to take a lot of different things to convince people that they are ready to take this journey and they're ready to get out there. There's a whole travel ecosystem that we have talked a lot about for many, many, many years. But right now, the challenge is that you have so many different touch points, and all of those touch points need to be undertaking cleaning and safety and to tell me what they're doing and try to minimize risk every step of the way. So if I am concerned about a weak link, then I'm not going to take that trip. So business travel. Business travel is very uncertain. I think that the best way that I can summarize this is I think that you're very hard pressed to send somebody on a business trip when you haven't even pulled them back into the office. So I think that that is something that we'll be continuing to see for your big corporate clients. And when they're bringing people in, are they back in their office? Are they willing to hold meetings again? Part of the reason is that, again, it's mentally overwhelming to think about all of the things that need to happen before you can get on an airplane. This is an example, that BCD sent out. So these are established business travelers, and these are all of the different ways that they're showing, hey, this is all the things that you need to do when you're at the airport. And here are all the things that you need to do when you're at the hotel. The road warriors need to be retaught. And so what does that mean for the average consumer? Again, it is not seen as being something that is incredibly safe. As it talks to group travel, you'll see the continued, again, I'm risk adverse. I don't want to be part of these headlines. What happens with the virus is what's going to happen with live meetings. So again, a conversation, what are meeting planners doing right now? What are their priorities? You can see some of the examples here right now. It's continuing postponement. It's just information. Tell me what the regulations are in your city. Tell me what I can do and can't do. It used to be dates, race, and space. Now it's a dates, rates, space, and safety protocols. So I think that will continue to be something that's very top of mind in any meeting planners that you have contact with, making sure that you're providing them all the latest and greatest information and not making them hunt for it. People continue to say that they are going to avoid meetings and events. Again, very stable, not a lot of change as it relates to this in particular. I will say again, this is something that we have seen shift over the course of time. The beginning, I also call it the hope springs eternal effect. It was, I'm going to be back in meetings in the fall. And then you kind of see it kind of just getting push. And this is where we currently are as of 2 weeks ago as it relates to meetings and events, with a significant portion, I would say, saying I'm already thinking that it's going to be the back half of 2021. So what are we doing as an organization? What are some of those, some of those things, some of those tools that I'd like for people to know about? We really from the get-go said, okay, we're not just going to stop and sit. What are the things that we can do to make things continue to move forward? So we're talking about leisure travelers, and then we're also talking to groups and meetings and events. So as it relates to sales, again, a timeline of kind of what have we been doing all the way through as it relates to sales. Again, in the beginning, as many of you probably experienced, it was how do we rebook this business? How do we figure out all these tricky contract negotiations? How do we continue to keep these clients in the city? Then with the killing of George Floyd, there was a lot of conversations that we had around safety. What does it mean for my attendees? What do I still need to do as it relates to COVID versus safety? And then you start to get into the extension of the limitations of the group sizes. How do we continue to work with our groups through that? And now we're kind of moving in and advocating for an opportunity to hopefully increase some of those group sizes, as we know that many meeting planners won't even look at a destination until they know that they can logistically meet, and they're not willing to look 6 months into the future and make that already a gamble or a bet to say, well, I have a group of 500, you're at 250, you can't promise me that you're going to be at 500 in 6 months, so I'm not even going to look at you. We do have our customer advisory board that we do have a meeting with, a longer term meeting within October. So we're excited to see what they have to say. We did have a few on a call yesterday, again, sharing those insights that they're really in this wait and hold and see pattern as well. So we are looking at our local area to hopefully continue to do some smaller business, smaller meetings and provide that space that people need. As it relates to site inspections, new protocols, just as you all have experienced, kind of asking our meeting planners, what do you need to see? What is it that you would like to see when you're here? And how can we model for you whatever it is that's going to make you feel the most safe and secure? As it relates to leisure travel, we have a variety of different phases that we've gone throughout the pandemic. In the beginning, we really focused on, we got this Minneapolis, how can you support the local community? From there, we moved into the virtual experiences, how can you explore Minneapolis from home? And now we're really into what we're calling the hyper-local messaging to try to get people within the city and the metro area just to feel comfortable coming out and about again. So we did an influencer campaign to start this, highlighting a number of different restaurants, working with a variety of influencers to showcase what it looked like. This was back in June, what it looked like in the new world order. What did it look like to stand on a square? What did it look like to wear a mask? And try to, again, get people comfortable with the idea that businesses were open and they could support them. We've moved into the second wave of this local campaign, a few weeks ago. We were actually all set to launch with a campaign with the idea of summer still on in the city the last week of May, right after Memorial Day. But with the killing of George Floyd, that no longer was the tenor that we needed to provide to the city. So now we really are trying to say, what can we do to help support our community and to help bolster it? Because without those businesses to be here, what are we going to be able to sell? What are we going to be able to market? Because we're not going to have events for a while. So this is the anthem that we had as it relates to the city and making people feel like there's something worth fighting for here and that we're going to do it. And I think that the last slide really, really encapsulates it. If we want our favorite places to survive, we need to keep showing up for them, to support the things we love about our city and fight for what we want to change, to be intentional, to shape our community from the small businesses up. Only we can create the Minneapolis we want to live in. So the idea with this was a campaign of We Need Us. We have it located in a number of places throughout the cities. We also have some very large billboards, again, with that message of supporting the small businesses that support us back, and posters located in various neighborhoods so that the neighborhoods could get involved, as well as obviously a very strong social push. We did a number of locations, film shoots around the cities, so we're able to showcase some of these businesses and to be able to incorporate them. And we have a landing page on our website that highlights a lot of this as well. We do have a toolkit if this is something that you'd like to get involved with, so that you could customize it. You could put something up in your own windows if you'd like, or if you simply want to share on social. This is something that we do have, and we'd like for everybody to get involved in any way that they are able to, or would like to have some positive impact in showing that. A little bit about some other content that we are creating. We know that there has been a strong increase in supporting Black-owned businesses. We created a number of pieces of content around that, working with some folks that we actually had already established relationships with that have been writers and photographers for us as contractors, helped create this really amazing section of our website. So if you do have people that are looking for these resources, know that we do have them available. We've also kind of created a how to be a good customer. This is something that we heard from a lot of the restaurant partners, that people just didn't know how to act, or they were acting really inappropriately. So it was, how can we help, again, take some of that pressure off the frontline staff to educate people about this is what you need to do when you come into a Minneapolis business. And then finally, we did create an assortment of content around kind of the staycation idea, as it were. What's open? What can you do in downtown? What can you see if you are in the metro area and you just need that night away? For marketing for our group and meeting events, again, a number of different categories of those planners, and we need to be speaking to all of them. We have greatly expanded information both about public safety and all of the conversation that's been happening around that, and we update that at least every week as it relates to what's happening at city council level. And then we also have our health and safety information as it relates to COVID. And this is where you can kind of see, again, from the meeting planner perspective, they need to know all this information. How can we provide and serve it up to them? This is the messaging that we are using as it relates to groups and events. It's very much factual based, trying to encourage that we are open and ready, but it's not so much of the, hey, have a night out on the town, what are my attendees going to do, and more of, we can take care of you and here are all the ways that we're going to take care of you. We do have a number of places that we are placing that, including a new video that we are hoping to shoot at the end of September. We're very desperately trying to find a couple of meetings and events in hotels to film and shoot that are taking place. So if you are, please do let me know, because we'd love to know about that, so we can have potentially a discussion about filming that, because we know nobody wants to be first, but everybody wants to see what it looks like. So that's something that we're focused on right now. So as for your own businesses, what are some of the things that you can do right now? Your Google profile, if you have control of that, that is a very important area to continue to put opening, closing, along with your associated businesses that are located in your property or around, putting that information up, obviously, in places on your website, and then in social media. So again, there's an opportunity here to make sure that you're touching all of these places. I would say that if you only have the bandwidth to do one, that it would be your Google profile. Google is basically the internet, and if something says closed, people don't pick up the phone and call. They're just not going to come. So I think that that's something, as you continue to think about your own modified hours, don't make people search, serve it up for them right away. We also have for a one sheeter on how you can do that. That's located on our website. If you go to minneapolis.org and just type in Google, you can see that there's information on how you could update your profile if you do have access to it. Finally, safety, cleaning, all of the protocols, all the things that you are doing, videos showing it. People want to know this. Don't make them look for it, and don't skimp on this information. Every little thing that you're doing, tell people, because they need to feel comfortable with what they're doing. So that is a very broad and very in-depth at the same time overview of everything that's kind of going on in the community. And I would love to answer any questions that I might be able to.
Thank you very much, Courtney. I have a few questions myself, and maybe I'll open it up to the audience first to see if we have any questions on the phone. Or if you think of one while we're talking, you can also go ahead and put it in the chat as well. Okay. Yeah, great information, Courtney. Lots of good stuff. I think going through it, I was writing some things down, and one thing I wrote down was, how does Minneapolis or Meet Minneapolis working towards the drive-in market and our local customers? And you answered all that in the last part of your slide. That's all really good information, and I would encourage anybody on the phone who sees this recording to go to Minneapolis.org and look at. I just hold up the website on my computer, and it has that "We Need Us" right on the top of it. Great toolkit there. I think it's a good way to promote the hotels as well. So thinking about how your hotel is supporting local businesses and how is it attracting customers. One thing, and so you answered a lot of my questions about, having a plan. Is Meet Minneapolis going more towards the leisure travel since business travel isn't seem to be reappearing for the rest of 2020? Is that something our hotel should be more focused on too, rather than the meeting planning and anything and things like that?
I think if you're looking for bolstering your 2020 business, then I certainly would be focusing on the leisure traveler versus kind of waiting to see with those meetings and events. I think that the leisure traveler will come back, has shown to come back faster, although not necessarily in great numbers. But I do think that that's something that we'll continue to see as this fear, again, continues to override how do I feel about meetings and events. So if you get it, just because you get it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be able to continue to, that meeting will actually occur, just again, given all these pressures that we've seen.
So is Meet Minneapolis kind of saying 2021, we're back in our normal meeting planning and sales process?
So we actually, as far as our organization, 20%, I said at the beginning, 20% is booked in the year for the year. So most of our business is already on the books for 2021, as it were, and even pushed into, because we've extended those 2020s and put some of them into 21, 22, things like that. So a lot of our team is actually still focused on those big bids that are still out, those big citywides that are planning in advance. As far as, do we expect that there will be meetings that will be happening in the future in Minneapolis? I do think that we will continue to see some of those small groups as it relates through the fall, but I don't expect that we would see a large citywide this November or December, although we do still have some things that are on the books. I just think it continues to be a challenge right now.
Okay. Would you encourage, so hotels aren't really considered a small business in Minneapolis, right? So how do we tap into that mindset of supporting small businesses? Do you have any suggestions?
I think it's actually incredibly easy to, and I think that the hotels are incredibly supportive already of small business. I think that that's just all the donations that I've seen people give, the staffing that people give, the PPE products that people gave, from cleaning, things like that. I think that there are a lot of stories from the hotels that the community just doesn't know about. So I think that showcasing, a very easy way is, if you do have a social channel that you have control over, it's highlighting those ones that are within walking distance that your guests always go to. Or, again, right now with, concierge, maybe is not necessarily a first staffed opportunity. Again, I think that local staycation, what's open, what's closed, we're tracking that information, knowing that some of your staff may have 5 jobs right now, knowing that that resource is available. I think those are also very easy ways, even if it's just a, printed poster that's like looking for something to do in walking distance. Here are these great things. Updating that, updating what you would have already provided the guest in the past, so it's current. those are all great ways to show and support small businesses. And then they'll see it too. If somebody comes in with a map or they come in with that handout from the hotel.
Okay, great. Any other questions out there for Courtney about Minneapolis tourism? You might have to unmute your phone. I saw someone pop off mute, but maybe that was an accident. Okay, well, with that, we'll wrap things up here. So thank you, Courtney, for joining us for HSMAI Minnesota Live. We're doing this webinar series. We started it up again recently. We actually have a episode coming up next month talking about forecasting. It was one of the hot topics of the survey that the members wanted to know about. So Courtney gave some great information about what's coming to Minneapolis or what's not coming to Minneapolis in the next month or so. And then next month we're going to talk about forecasting with Steve Green, one of our past presidents. So we're very excited to talk about that. So hopefully we see most of you next month. The date is September 16th. It's a Wednesday, same time, noon. And we'll get that meeting information out there. And I believe it will be on the website shortly. So go ahead and check hsmaiminnesota.com to follow up on some events, contact us. And as always, we hope everyone's doing well. We look forward to seeing you again in person whenever we can. And then, so connect with us and let us know if there's anything we can do to help support you and your hotel in your sales, marketing, revenue management efforts. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.